we're gonna air grievances on Juneteenth today. A lot of people don't really have a real idea of what Juneteenth is, including some parts of our government. So I thought we'd do just sort of a brief correction as to what it actually was. It wasn't the official end of slavery in the country. That did not come until later with the 13th Amendment. It wasn't even with the Emancipation Proclamation. That didn't even cover all states. Border states were not covered in that. And border states in some somewhat isolated areas, slavery still existed. And the reason that those were exempt during the Emancipation Proclamation is because Lincoln was worried that it might push the border states, Missouri being one of them, to side with the Confederacy, as they were, trying to largely utilize this to do harm to the Confederacy and use it also as recruitment, what would be former slaves to the Union side. And so there were a number of calculations involved in it, but it to some degree, it reminds me of Cinco de Mayo and how people in this country celebrate Cinco de Mayo. And if you ask the random person who acknowledges and celebrates it, they're like, well, it's Mexico's Independence Day. Nope, that's not what that is either. We tend to, in this country, and perhaps it's done in other countries as well, we will celebrate days that mark events that we, for the most part, seem to not really even know what they're about. Even though the day itself, Martin Luther King Jr. Day, you listen to what some of those who will recognize that day with parades, for example, and right here in Springfield is an example of it. But and you listen to their belief system, and it's the opposite of Martin Luther King Jr. I mean, his colorblind vision of a peaceful society is, according to the left today, racist. That's white supremacy. That's white privilege. The beliefs that were espoused by Martin Luther King Jr. today are declared proof of racism. Today, if you share those visions and ideas, you are a right-wing extremist. You're a white nationalist because you want to deny the history of things by not seeing color. And so even while Martin Luther King Jr. Day, people recognize, something to do with Martin Luther King Jr. Those who oftentimes are most active and waving the flags and virtue signaling off of it have no clue what he even stood for, because they stand for the opposite. And that's just something we tend to do in this country. We just take a holiday and turn it into something that it absolutely isn't. Even Christmas, how many people that aren't Christians want to turn it into something else? Let's make it Happy Holidays instead of Christmas, so that way people don't feel left out. Like, well, anyone's more than welcome to join and recognize the reason for Christmas. We don't have to pretend it's something it isn't. But yeah, this is just where we are. So a little bit about, not a tremendous amount of time because it's not overly complicated, about what it is that Juneteenth actually is. I still think there needs to be I believe the approach from conservatives in particular is a little backwards on this, and a lot of people do not believe this should be a federal holiday. And by the way, it shouldn't, because it didn't involve the federal government at all. Again, the 13th Amendment was something that came later. That if we're going to have a federal holiday that is celebrating the hard-fought decision, spilling blood, splitting family members, in order to right that wrong, it should be months after. It's December of 1865, right? The 13th Amendment, 63, 65. That's when it should be. But, nonetheless. All right. So we've got weather coming up. Latest developments, the Iranians shot a missile directly at a hospital in Iran shot a missile directly at a hospital in Israel. Fortunately, there weren't as many people that would normally be in there because the Israelis had, when it comes to the hospitals, they have tried to pare down the number of people in the hospitals that would match the amount of room that they have to move them into bomb shelters. So according to estimates, the number of patients in that hospital, I think it was either down 40% or it was down to 40%, which helped when it came to the number of casualties. Now, Iran is claiming, oopsie daisies, we meant to hit the building next door, which was a military facility to which the Israelis pointed out, and Google Maps shows this, that facility was like a mile away. But even at that, it's pretty funny that here's a country who has vowed to completely wipe this Israel off the map and to kill every Jew in existence. But then whenever they shoot a missile at a hospital that might look bad, they're like, oh, hey, oh no, we didn't mean to do that. Really? Why would you not mean to do that? You want all of these people gone. This is your stated purpose of developing nuclear weapons, is so that there is no more Israel. But that was an oopsie daisy. I don't think that adds up. Latest news update.
And the first alert forecast from Ozarks First meteorologist Tom Schmidt, sponsored by St. Clair the Ozarks Home Improvements. Today we'll see sunny skies with a high near 86. Tonight clear with a low around 65. For your Friday, sunny with a high near 91. Heat index values reaching up to 99. And for your Saturday, sunny and hot with a high near 92.
I got to tell you, and I know Mike just had the story, and it's been a local story. I think yesterday they had some sort of event there marking, I guess, the next step in spending lots and lots of taxpayer dollars in order to get that Jefferson Footbridge not up and running, but I guess usable. And I just don't know how this city has survived all this time without people being able to walk on that thing.
Honestly, I don't know either.
I mean, thank goodness priorities are straight.
Finally.
It's just one of those things. I'm like, really, this is what we're spending? Well, people might need to walk. Well, what have those people done all this time? How many years has it been?
It's been a very long time.
I quit following this story. I just think it's I just think it's dumb. And, but you got to understand, there's history there. Yeah, there's history in lots of things. It's a footbridge. It's not like there was some sort of civil rights march over it or something that you could be like, well, you got to understand that history was changed on that bridge. You're like, okay, I kind of get that. If it's going to draw tourism in and everything. It's like, really? Speaking of another dumb thing, have you noticed? Now, I think this is what it is. I think it must be put up by the city or the county. The relatively new intersection, Kansas Expressway and Republic Road, right? Mm-hmm. This intersection. And if you are, on the southeastern corner, there is a big sign, giant sign, and it's got some sort of logo. I think it's about the pedestrian safety stuff that the city's been pushing,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And then there's a QR code on it. Now, what device must one use for the QR code?
Would that be a cell phone?
Yeah, and what's the device that it is illegal to use while in your vehicle, in that capacity? I mean, you can have it mounted and have it streaming blue, but one of the things you absolutely cannot do is pick it up and take pictures, and particularly through an intersection. Like where you've got, it's not a confusing intersection, but you know how some people can be. You got more than one lane and so forth. And I'm like, is the city really, honestly, and I haven't taken a picture of the QR code. I need to just do it when I'm sitting there at the intersection. I was like, is this really, surely this is not an intersection pedestrian vehicle safety thing.
Right, yeah.
Because you are encouraging people to do something
Yeah,
that
to
is
look at their phone.
that is flat out against the law in Missouri
Well,
in the name of safety.
And what you said, yeah, it's ironic that they want you to scan a QR code when they're trying to get you to pay attention to pedestrians. So yeah, why don't you go ahead and look at your phone in that safety cares area?
It would not, but it just is. That's government, especially Springfield government. Now I'm making some assumptions here that is the purpose of that sign, and I mentioned it to my wife, and she's like, she said something about, have you talked about that? I was like, no, I haven't talked about it yet. I just, and I just haven't taken the picture of it to see if I suspect that that QR code takes you to that site that the city set up about pedestrian safety or whatever. But it reminds me, years ago, my brother he was at some airport, and I guess it was somewhat within the TSA area, where you go through security, and it must have been on the other side, but it was a sort of like a comment card QR code, where it was for the U.S. government, and it allowed you to fill out a survey about how you felt TSA was doing. And he had told me, because he told me this like right after it happened, that he had interaction with a lady who was TSA, and she was really, really nice. And he's like, you know what? I'm gonna fill this out because people always complain, and that's just the nature of things. So he's like, I'm gonna do this. It's gonna be positive. And so he gets out his phone in order to snap the QR code, and immediately some other TSA person came over and started barking at him. You can't have your phone out here. You can't be taking pictures in this secure area. And he's like, this is your QR code asking me to fill out. And the guy got belligerent with him and essentially, I don't know if he threatened to arrest him, but pretty much told him, you better comply, otherwise you're going to be in trouble. And I thought, there's government for you. I mean, here's a QR code. Take a picture of it to tell us how great we're doing, and then we're going to berate you, almost like a trap. So we can come and berate you. Boy. I find myself more and more like, well, that's government. Say it all the time to the girl child. Now she preemptively says it. I'll be like, you know what that is? She goes, it's government. Traffic update. I'm Nick. Are you on Blue Sky?
Now, do I look like a person that would be on Blue Sky?
Is it Blue Sky or Blue Ski? I think it's
I think
Blue Sky.
I think it's Blue Sky.
Blue Sky. Blue Sky's the whining room, the virtual whining room where people after, well, it's a combination of Elon Musk eliminating censorship on X, and then Trump winning, and the left, they live in a bubble and they cannot stand diversity of thought, and so they're like, we're gonna create our own. Now they did it under the guise of X, because Elon doesn't censor people over there. That means they're Trump supporters, so it's filled with white supremacists and hate-filled, all of these people promoting violence and so forth. And so we're going to create a place that is filled with love. Well, it's a place filled with lefties. So, and we'll get to this. There was an interview in, I think it's Fortune magazine, with Mark Cuban, who made a big deal out of going to Blue Sky for that very reason, to get away from the hate. And he's now giving interviews like, this place is horrible. He's like, this is an awful, awful place. The left has turned this into one of the most vile places to be. But that's what they do. I mean, it's consistent. So anyway, J.D. Vance.
I saw this.
This is great. J.D. Vance decided to sign up for Blue Sky. And the first thing that he began posting was information regarding the Supreme Court decision that said Tennessee can have laws that protect children from child abuse in the name of transgenderism. There were laws put in place that say you can't, lure kids into believing if they don't get sex change operations, they're going to kill themselves. And Democrats were like, no, we should be able to do that. And the Supreme Court, 6-3, was like, no, laws to protect children from that form of child abuse are perfectly okay. So J.D. Vance goes on Blue Sky, and he posts it kind of, I think some of the quotes, some of the opinion from Clarence Thomas, I believe, and maybe some others. So it's just it was about the ruling, because there was obviously a lot of coverage of this yesterday. I think it was just under 30 minutes they suspended his account.
Now it was an accident.
Well, of course it was.
It was an accident.
Of course it was an accident.
And he has been reinstated.
Yeah. I mean, well, sure. It's every time one of these accidents occurs, who is the person that always gets banned? Who is it that is the one that is always the victim of the oversight or the accident? It's always a conservative. It's always a Trump supporter, or now the vice president of Donald Trump. One of the headlines was, well, that was fast.
That's awesome.
Yeah, this story, I think this is Fox News story. J.D. Vance account suspended, then quickly restored on liberal ex-competitor. Vice President J.D. Vance firing back at backlash against the administration's crackdown. Oh, wait, sorry, that's a description of a photo that actually didn't print off in the story. Vice President J.D. Vance briefly suspended Wednesday night after a liberal ex-competitor, Blue Sky, within the first hour of the country's number 2 leading, joining the platform. He has since been reinstated. The company told Fox News Digital, "We welcome the vice president to the conversation on Blue Sky. There have been many past attempts to impersonate Vice President J.D. Vance on Blue Sky, as he is a public figure, and the J.D. Vance account was flagged as part of that pattern by our automated system and temporarily suspended. The account was quickly reinstated within 20 minutes of the suspension. We've also added a verified badge to help users confirm the authenticity of the profile." Now, you would think that if there is an automated flag for that purpose, it would be when he would try to sign up or establish the account, not after he posted something that people on the left didn't like. Although I could believe that is an automated system mechanism within Blue Sky is that if you post something that the left doesn't like, you're automatically suspended. So that part of it I could believe, but I don't know. I don't know how it's set up. Don't have an account there. That may make sense, but it just seems, again, if you have a system that is meant to flag, to make sure accounts don't exist that are set up as fake accounts, it would be whenever the person or the bot tried to set it up, not after they set it up and you approved and everything got done, and then they post something that the left doesn't like. That just doesn't seem real legit to me. But again, the left has a real history of this. Now, why would they go ahead and reinstate? Is it a public company? I don't even know if it's a public company, but I mean, they don't do that well. Honestly, most people don't even know about them. It is an echo chamber. It essentially creates a safe cult-like space to where you don't have to deal with outside perspectives or anybody pushing against your particular narrative. At the same time, I can see this being a decision that this is a no-brainer. The vice president on here, and he's going to trigger people with his transphobic language and his his efforts to get trans kids to to kill themselves, but then recognizing that, well, this kind of just is this proves the point of the Trump world, that we are nothing but closed-minded bigots that are just an echo chamber refusing to have actual thoughts. That it proves we are everything we accuse them of being. And so for the very least public relation purposes, we've got to go ahead and reinstate him. But this is of no surprise to I think no one was surprised. And, of course, no one was really outraged by it. It was more just, oh, what a surprise. That didn't take very long at all. First posting from J.D. Vance. And the anti-freedom of speech people booted him out. Springfield's Talk 104. Oh, now what's going to be funny is I would, if I were him, I'd almost push the line a little bit, just because, now that they've done this, they've made sort of a point that, oh, no, we're not about censorship. So like, oh, well, okay, well, let's see about that. I'd be just a little bit tempted. Springfield's Talk 104.1. I'm Nick Reed. Pyramid Roofing Company talk and text line. Someone texted in, why is there a Kansas Highway Patrol driving safety ad on KSGF? Missouri Highway Patrol can't do one. So this is a common theme of a question, and that is, why is this ad? This ad doesn't seem relevant to this particular area, particularly for a local radio station in Springfield, Missouri. So the ads that you hear over the airwaves, like if you're listening to the radio, those ads are different ads than you hear while streaming. Now, they may be the same ads, but they are, they may not be. All right. So, in other words, they don't mirror one another. It's not the exact same thing. And there's actually these silent little command signals whenever we go to on air a commercial break. Our stream hears this silent signal saying, oh, they're going to a commercial break. So now we start playing the commercials that are specifically meant for the online broadcast. And there's a number of reasons for that. A lot of it has to do with royalties or not royalties, but, paying voice actors and stuff. Nothing that really necessarily applies to us, but it's just sort of a standard that began some time ago. And so there will be obviously some local commercials in there. Some of our clients specifically buy just online. Not a lot of them. Most of them, they will have online, and there will also be local. But sometimes there will be ads that are, I guess, third-party purchased, if you will, that we don't have anything to do with. And if what it tries to do is recognize where you are so that the ad is most relevant to you. Particularly if you listen online. We have online listeners outside of the United States of America. And so if you're somebody who lives in, Jim in Texas. I know we got Hank in Florida. There are a number of you that I just know well because I know personally, or you text in. And so to hear all of the time, especially if it's not, local commercials that we are scheduling, the people that third party that schedules the other commercials, they want, they don't want to, if an advertiser is paying them in the Springfield area, well, running you in to a listener in Florida doesn't make as much sense. So they will try to run ads that are more relevant to you. And that being said, a lot of times people are like, why do I keep getting ads in Spanish? Well, your phone, for whatever reason, believes that you are in an area in which the Spanish-speaking population is relevant. And so if you are getting Kansas Highway Patrol ads, for whatever reason, your phone believes that you are either there or you frequent that area often. And so that's why that happens. And I guess go to your phone store if you want to change that. I know for some reason on my phone, if you are going to a particular website and it's for a store and you're wanting to visit your quote specific store, if I don't have that pre-set up, a lot of times it immediately thinks I'm in St. Louis. And so it'll have some St. Louis store. So I have to change that. But anyhow, this comes up every once in a while. It's a completely legit question. I'd be confused if I didn't know either. And so I thought I would just answer that. It's kind of Juneteenth being a federal holiday and all. Just seems like a good day to throw some of those little tidbits in there. Springfield's Talk 104. It has nothing to do with Juneteenth. Sarah and I are the only ones in the building today, so it feels like a Saturday or something. Much more casual. All right, let's get traffic. The Pyramid Roofing Company talk and text line 447 KSGF. I'm Nick Reed.
Springfield's Talk 1041, the first alert forecast from Ozarks First meteorologist Tom Schmidt, sponsored by Wolfpack Cleaners, your residential and commercial cleaning professionals. Today we'll see sunny skies with a high near 86. Tonight clear with a low around 65. For your Friday, sunny with a high near 91 and a heat index value reaching close to 99. And for your Saturday, sunny and hot with a high near 92.
Yeah, some people might think I'm a nitpicker, and I can be.
What?
I think some people, some things need to be nitpicked.
What
Language is very, very important. I'm just watching some of the coverage on our multitude of monitors that we have in the studio here, talking about this decision regarding sex change operations for kids, and which even that term, I don't, because you're not really changing the sex, but cosmetic surgery operations maybe is a better term, but and it refers to as treatment. It doesn't treat anything. It's not a treatment. Surgery is an accurate description because it is surgery. But you're not treating anything. Oh, you're treating mental issue. Really? What other mental issue requires cosmetic surgery? And I'm not saying that there aren't any, but it's made to seem like this is a no-brainer. Well, 12-year-olds have to have these surgeries because they have serious mental issues. Get what other life-altering, irreversible surgeries, particularly for kids, do we consider necessary because of a psychological or emotional issue? I mean, I can't think of any. I mean, if that's the position we're going to take, and you have, some 14-year-old girl who hasn't fully developed, or, she's just really depressed and sad and embarrassed and can't get up and go, get out of bed every day and go to school because, she doesn't have what she feels are, breasts that are the size that are in line with normal girls. And, we better get her a boob job. Because, it's better to have a 14-year-old with double Ds than a dead daughter with A cups. I mean, do we do that? Of course not. It's insane, the idea that we would do that. And then to argue, well, I mean, that's a treatment for her mental health issues. Like, are you out of your mind? That's not a treatment for a mental health issue. It's insane. So this reference to it is treatment for it's not treatment. It's not treating. Not in any sort of medically positive way. All right, now we're talking about the blue sky. This is the left's answer to X, and they claimed that this was started in order to create a space that was full of love and to get away from the dangerous rhetoric and the nastiness of MAGA world, because it's just bad and dangerous. I think a lot of Americans for the first time today or yesterday even knew of this app, Blue Sky, because of headlines with J.D. Vance as vice president signing up, getting an account, and then within 30 minutes he was banned. He was posting information about the Supreme Court ruling yesterday with transgenderisms, kids surgery, and so forth. And I thought that this following story that I believe it is, I've gotten back, Fortune magazine. It's ironic, but at the same time, it is exactly what happens every time the left ends up controlling any sort of space. Whether it is a classroom, it is a university, it is a protest, or it is a social media space. This is absolutely consistent. Here, the story headline, Blue Sky is backfiring. Mark Cuban says, the lack of diversity of thought is actually pushing users back to X. After Elon Musk, goes the story, bought Twitter, now X, in late 2022, the vibes on the platform started changing. And many accounts that were verified lost their status. But the mass exodus from X came in late 2024 following the U.S. presidential election and Musk throwing his support and millions behind Donald Trump. By December of 24, the platform had lost about 2.7 million active Apple and Android users in just 2 months, with competitor Blue Sky absorbing nearly all of those users. So they were left-wingers. Colloquially, it became somewhat of a safe haven for liberal users who wanted to drown out the noise of President Trump's reelection. Quote, "It's people wanting to just try something new. It's people finding their community here," Blue Sky CEO Jay Graber told Vox, VOX, Media's Peter Kafta in a June 4th podcast. Quote, "I think in general it's both people looking for something and people looking to get away from something." Oh, isn't that just so poetic? Between November 2024 and this May, Blue Sky grew from about 10 million users to 30 million, according to a Pew Research Center analysis. Many news influencers, shocking that they would find a home there at Blue Sky, people who also regularly post about current events on the platform, left-leaning politically, according to the analysis. One such figure was billionaire Mark Cuban, who supported Vice President Kamala Harris during her presidential run, although he didn't give her a penny for her campaign, he said in October. Cuban became a regular Blue Sky user, having posted nearly 2,000 times since November 2024. When he first joined the platform, he famously posted, quote, "Hello, less hateful world," end quote. But Cuban has changed his tune. In a series of posts this week, Cuban argued that Blue Sky has become too much of an echo chamber and is actually sending more users back to X. Cuban wrote, "Engagement went from great convos on many topics to agree with me or you're a Nazi fascist." Oh, no kidding. Really? People from the left take that's the crux of every the argument that they have on Blue Sky is if you don't agree with me, you're a Nazi. That's all the Democrat Party has become. The former Shark Tank star and Dallas Mavericks owner also said he thinks Blue Sky users have grown ruder and more hateful. He said, "Even if you agree with 95% of what a person is saying on a topic, if there's just one point you might call out as being more of a gray area, they call you a fascist, etc.," said Cuban, whose current net worth is about $8.33 billion, according to Bloomberg. And isn't that true? Don't you love it whenever these people on the left that they begin to see just a little bit of truth? I mean, it's not like their entire ideology changes, and it shouldn't necessarily. I think that we need people on the left who recognize what others on the left are doing to the Democrat Party in particular. That is something that is needed. But they make these observations. It's almost like Jake Tapper with his book, where he comes out with his book and like, look what we found out. Something was wrong with Joe Biden, and the rest of the world's like, oh, okay. Thanks for filling us in on that, buddy. So here you got Mark Cuban making this declaration. It's crazy. I mean, these lefties here, they become hateful, and you can agree with 99% of what they say, but if there's just one thing you disagree with, or you don't even disagree with, but you're like, well, that might be a gray area. You're a fascist Nazi all of a sudden. Yeah, that's right. Welcome to reality. This is the left. These are your people. Cuban also reposted a Washington Post opinion article published Sunday titled "The Blue Sky Bubble Hurts Liberals and Their Causes." Well, I think more accurately, it isn't the blue sky bubble that hurts liberals and their causes. It's liberals that hurt liberals and their causes at this point. It's because, Blue Sky is an echo chamber, and it does, I think, do harm to the left in the sense that it helps the left isolate itself from the rest of the world, and so they're detached from reality. But they do that anyway. This is why they alienate family members. This is why they separate from friends. This is why they refuse to associate with people who are Trump supporters. They want to reinforce this massive concrete barrier around their cult. And so Blue Sky is just another place to do it. It's not like Blue Sky is creating this newfound phenomenon of the left. It's just another tool that allows them to do what it is that they've organically been doing for some time. Author Megan McArdle argued Blue Sky's left-leaning user base segregates it into a political silo, with Cuban agreeing, quote, the lack of diversity of thought here is really hurting usage. Cuban wrote in a separate Blue Sky update, including the Washington Post article, quote, the moderation and block tools on here are so advanced. If you see someone you don't want to see on here, just block them. Don't attack them. There used to be great give and take discussions on politics and news, not so much anymore, he added. Doesn't have to be this way. Listen, we talked about when this first launched, and actually it may not have been when it first launched, but when it was in the news, Mark Cuban talking about going over there, oh, it's going to be this open space with all these discussions. And I knew at the time exactly what would happen. And that would be eventually they would weed out anyone who had any sort of diverse thoughts. Anyone, in the beginning, they may be like, look at us. We're having robust debate. We're having these disagreements. This is wonderful. But it would not last long, because it never lasts long with the left. They do not believe in anything other than single thought and total compliance. And Blue Sky becoming that arena is just more of the same. Springfield's Talk 104.1. I'm Nick Reed. Oh, it's a federal holiday today. Many of you work at banks and government facilities, maybe even a workplace. You have today off. What will you do? Maybe you're going to sit outside with all of your friends, family member, enjoy the great outdoors of your backyard and just reflect on Juneteenth, or like I like to call it, thank a Republican for fighting to free the slaves day. It's a little wordier, but much more accurate in terms of what the day actually should be representing. But maybe you're just sitting around in your old lawn chairs, and boy, they're kind of cracking over here, breaking over there, so forth, and you think, man, sure would be nice to not be embarrassed by this existence. Well, with Hunter Hardscapes and Outdoor, you can be not only not embarrassed, but you can look like you really got your stuff together. You really got your act together. And that's what a professionally installed with premier product, patio, outdoor, living, cooking, kitchen space, covered up, however you possibly could envision it, and even things you can't envision, Hunter Hardscapes and Outdoor can do that for you. Of course, consultations. I mean, it's almost a cliche, free consult. Who's going to charge you for a consultation? I suppose some places may, but, you can give them a holler. They'll come over. Or you may think to yourself, I have no idea. No concept of what sort of investment based off of what it is I'm looking to do. And they have a ballpark cost calculator that you can toy with there on their site, as well as before and after pictures. So you can take that outdoor area and turn it into an outdoor living space, entertaining space. And so you can make days like Juneteenth that much more meaningful. Hardscapes.com, also KSGF.com, under Nick's endorsements. Sound like Tom Selleck. Was that Tom Selleck?
Oh, I wasn't paying attention.
I always think of, I like Tom Selleck, those reverse mortgage ads. I talk about that oftentimes. That it just seems they were everywhere late night on certain channels for a while, and it kind of almost seemed like a dangerous, not a scam so much, but you have your home paid off, and then you basically turn it over to someone else, and then the equity of the home they use for you to sort of pay them rent. They're like, well, what happens when that run out? Do you get kicked out? I don't know. That seems kind of sketchy. But it's not. And I know that because of Alex and Anthony Carricker. They've talked about that. And that's one of the services that they offer at iwantagreathomeloan.com is that reverse mortgage thing. And you don't have to have your home totally paid off. And when they've talked about it, they're like, obviously it's not for everybody, but it's also not something where, you're going to get kicked out of your home once you get to a certain deadline, and here you are, 89 years old with nowhere to go, and that's not how it plays out. Also, so if it's something that you're just even curious about how it works, you can reach out to them. And of course, that whole home loan process, refinancing process, it all begins on their very simple, easy to use website, iwantagreathomeloan.com, because you do. We will be at Scramblers tomorrow. Friday Road Show. That is sponsored by the good people at Shirley's Heating and Air. So the doors will be opening at 6 a.m. if you want to stop by and join us. We would love for you to do so. And then KSGF.com, speaking of food, Godfather's Pizza, some of the best pizza that you're going to find around. They do delivery as well. But you can sign up to win free pizza for you and some of your coworkers at work by going to KSGF.com. And welcome, everyone. My name is Nick Reed. Today is Juneteenth, a national holiday, which should not be a national holiday because it wasn't a national event. And I thought, given that there's going to be news stories about it, there's going to be a lot of misinformation about it, largely because of ignorance, and we increasingly, particularly providers of information, have less and less interest in actually researching things and finding out if it's true. Just sort of regurgitate what we've heard. No verification, which is part of the problem we have in this country. Juneteenth is oftentimes described. In fact, there's a story on this in the Federalist, and they note that PBS, which we're told is, without taxpayers funding for PBS, we'd all just be ignorant. We have to have. You pay for PBS's existence. They write, Juneteenth commemorates when the last enslaved African Americans learned that they were free. Well, that's just not true factually. Now, what it does mark is the moment when troops arrived in Galveston, Texas, in 1865, and announced to those slaves that were still enslaved, hey, you guys here in Texas, you're free. Don't know if you've heard, if you haven't logged on, you guys are good now. And so locally, that is something that had been recognized for some time. Not, like a massive huge deal. Most of the country didn't even know about it. And then, this is part of social media. Stuff like that spreads. And all of this sudden, little celebrations that happen in local communities for years and years and years, people learn about well outside of it. And they're like, oh, that sounds like a cool idea. We want to celebrate that as well. And that's what happened with Juneteenth. Well, it got transformed from this small little recognition of the people in that area learning that as slaves in Texas, because of the Emancipation Proclamation, they were free to slaves, into this misconstrued belief that it was the day that the last slaves in the country finally found out that slavery was banned in America, and so finally, and that's just not true. That didn't happen until December. December 6th is when the 13th Amendment was fully ratified, and then slavery was constitutionally outlawed in the United States of America. In fact, that day, June 19th in Galveston, Texas, slaves were still not only, quote, legal, but existed in Kentucky and, of all places, Delaware. The Emancipation Proclamation did not apply. The executive order from Abraham Lincoln, it did not apply to the, quote, border states during the Civil War period, because Lincoln did not want to cause those states, including Missouri, to get pushed into joining the Confederacy, and so he left them out of that Emancipation Proclamation. And so you had, though it wasn't, massively prevalent, but there still were pockets of area, in Kentucky and Delaware in which slaves were still not only, quote, legal, but they existed until December 6th of 1865. So Juneteenth shouldn't be, in my opinion, a federal holiday, because June 19th, 1865, that particular event wasn't a federal event. It was something that was in Galveston, Texas, and it specifically involved a certain, in that case, Texas, but Confederate states, but not the nation. If we want to have a federal day recognizing the massive alteration to this country in which constitutionally it became clear through the 13th Amendment that slavery was not going to be allowed, then it should be December 6th of 1865. I mean, I just, that seems pretty logical to me. I've not ever heard any reason why it shouldn't be that. Now, the reason it isn't is just because, again, we're very into symbolism and we don't care about actual meaning. Oftentimes, we don't care about history. We rewrite history. You and I don't. This is, part of what we do. We find interest in these things, and we like to know the truth and the origins and why does this exist, why does that exist, and Juneteenth is one in which the vast majority of people have no idea what it even is truly about. Now, aside from that aspect of it, this is a day, this should be a day in which if the Republican Party wants to really brag on itself, should absolutely mark, Juneteenth, it's a federal holiday, mark it as your welcome day. This is the reason the Republican Party was born. It's mission accomplished day. And it wasn't just that day in small-town Wisconsin that the Republican Party was born in order to abolish slavery, but you think about how far the Republican Party would go. One, you had this new party born and then actually getting a president under its banner elected, Abraham Lincoln, that would then lead us through a civil war in which you had Democrats spilling blood and families were split up and everything over, the issue. Democrats obviously side of slavery, Republicans, their whole purpose to be against it, to get rid of it. To tell you, one, how much better the Democrats are at marketing, and of course they have the media on their side, but also how dishonest they are. They are the part, and this is all very relevant to this particular day. It's kind of why I like Juneteenth, because it's reason to really let people know the true history of what all of that means, and where from a political aspect, the Democrat Party that portrays somehow itself as the party that has always just been about equal rights and the party that loves to just talk about how horrible we are because of slavery, and then those evil Republicans, when the Democrats were the one that fought tooth and nail to keep slaves, spilled blood for it, willing to die. And it's the Republican Party that existed for the purpose of getting rid of slavery. The Republican Party should be the loudest, most vocal cheerleaders of Juneteenth to make sure everyone understands in the political context with the parties that exist today, which one was the one that ended slavery while the other fought and spilled blood in order to protect it. And then, of course, offshooting of that, which party is the party that developed the Klan, where you had masked individuals trying to frighten people into compliance, which is relevant today. I mean, you look at people on the left wearing masks and rioting today in the streets in order to get their way. I mean, the Democrats in particular just really, they go through these cycles where they repeat behavior. Of course, segregation. The party of segregation, and it's an opportunity and a great moment to really inform people of the truth. And actually, the news, I don't have it in front of me, but I read through a piece in the News Leader, and it did a pretty good job of explaining the realities of, what Juneteenth actually was, and that Juneteenth wasn't a day that freed all of the slaves. It wasn't a day that reflects when the final slaves found out that they were free, that in fact we still had slavery in this country, and it wasn't until December 6th of that same year in which the 13th Amendment was fully ratified, and that was the day. Now, what they didn't do, of course, is the truth and the history of the two political parties and their play in the whole issue of slavery. They're, given that they're all, well, they certainly push the Democrat agenda today. They're not going to reveal the true history of slavery in the Democrat Party, but, you can only ask for so much. So if you are a Republican or a conservative, and I get the instinct when it comes to Juneteenth is to be like, oh boy, here. And it's because of the reason Juneteenth became a federal holiday. And that's because, it was an effort by the Biden administration, Joe Biden. I think it was during the Biden administration. But Democrats to sort of run with the mantle as if, look at us. We're the ones who care about these things, not those racist Republicans. And because of the reason behind them doing what they were doing and the virtue signaling component to it, it instinctively makes Republicans like, all right, well, we can't fight against this one. We shouldn't fight against it. Should embrace it and say, you are welcome. You are welcome. And for the descendants of those that were held as slaves, just to suggest you might want to thank a Republican for Juneteenth on this day of observation and surely a desire to better understand the truth and the history of this country. And I know it's just truth and facts and stuff. It's oftentimes not very exciting or relevant when it comes to these particular holidays. I think of Juneteenth a lot like Cinco de Mayo, in which we have these big celebrations, and then you talk to people like, Cinco de Mayo, oh yeah, it's Independence Day for Mexico. No, that's not what that is. It's very similar in the sense it wasn't even the all of Mexico. Cinco de Mayo was a recognition of, in Puebla, in which the local military fought off and beat the French, and so they retook Puebla. And it didn't have anything to do with Mexican independence whatsoever. It's just a small little area of Mexico, much like Juneteenth was a small little area in Texas. Now, of course, the French would come back later and kick the butts and retake Puebla, but, again, history. Springfield's Talk 104.1. We got a traffic update moments right now. Latest news.
And the first alert forecast from Ozarks First meteorologist Tom Schmidt, sponsored by St. Clair the Ozarks Home Improvements. Today we'll see sunny skies with a high near 86. Tonight clear with a low around 65. For your Friday, sunny with a high near 91. Heat index values reaching up to 99. And for your Saturday, sunny and hot with a high near 92.
Sarah Myers.
Thank you. Summer is here, and it is the perfect time to take care of that roof repair that you've been putting off, and no one makes it easier than Josh and his team over at the Pyramid Roofing Company. Now, the Pyramid team, they offer free roof inspections. They work with you through the insurance process without making you sign anything, and they will come up with the best solution for you and your home. Sometimes that doesn't mean a whole new roof, but maybe just a simple roof repair. And it doesn't matter if you need commercial, residential, or even metal roofing services. They do it all. So whether your roof is just nearing the end of its life, or maybe you've noticed storm damage from earlier this year, make sure to reach out to Josh today. Now, you can find all of the contact information for the Pyramid Roofing Company under the Sarah's Endorsements tab at ksgf.com.
Someone texted, I don't believe that we should take credit as a Republican to be the ones that freed the slaves any more than we should be held accountable for being responsible for slavery in the first place. I do appreciate the history behind it, though, that you provided. Now, I am being somewhat facetious when I say it should be Think a Republican Day instead of being called Juneteenth. Part of the reason, though, that I do that is to sort of draw attention to the truth and the reality, not only of the true history and what Juneteenth actually was versus the way that it's oftentimes portrayed, but we do have such also at the same time vast misunderstandings, and because it's deliberate, of the political parties in the country today and their connection to slavery, and also playing off this notion that, and to the point of the person who texted this in, hey, we shouldn't take credit for freeing the slaves as people that actually didn't do it any more than be blamed for it. And it's sort of kind of playing off that point. We're supposed to, and you hear this from Democrats a lot when it comes to reparations in particular. Well, we need to be held accountable. We need to make good for the things that we've done. And if that's the game we're going to play, if that's the way we're going to look at it, who's this we? I mean, I didn't have anything to do with it. In fact, the political party that I more closely affiliate with was actually the party that was born in order to and fought to free the slaves. So if we're going to say people who live today that have any sort of connection to the issue of slavery should be held accountable in that capacity, my connection is that I more closely associate with the party that freed them. So does it go that way? And so that's the point in that capacity that I'm making. But no, I totally agree that text itself is accurate. You and I today, in no way, shape, or form, are at all responsible or should be responsible for things that were done by people that aren't us. We oftentimes will point out we shouldn't be responsible because, though we weren't even alive. Those people weren't, there's no one even alive today. I don't care if they were. I'm still not responsible for it. I don't care if it's my own flesh and blood, a brother, a father. That it's one of the things that always differentiated the United States from so many other countries, and that is you are not held accountable for other people's sins. It was a recognition that we are individual human beings responsible for our own actions, not to be held responsible for other people's actions. And this idea that we should be runs absolutely counter to that understanding. And it also is just wrong. It's immoral. It's totally immoral to hold people accountable for something that someone else did, particularly based off how they look. Do you know how absurd that is? No different than somebody hating black people because, I saw a black person commit a crime once. Or, my grandfather, when he, worked in St. Louis, got stabbed to death by a person who is black, and so that means that black people owe me something. Well, of course not. That's ridiculous. But that's the same approach that people take when it comes to the reparations and the issue of slavery. That, well, because of your skin color, because of the way you look, and that's the exact same way people looked, 100 and some years ago. That means that you should be held accountable. No, you can argue that, and you may even win over some people's beliefs, and you may take some of my tax dollars in order to try and somehow fulfill your belief in that particular way, but you're still wrong. I mean, it's just, truth is truth. And you can also say, well, my truth is this. There's one truth, and that is the truth. You can say my truth. That's not actually a truth. It's opinion. Truth is truth, and you're just wrong. It's as easy as that. But the original point of the person texting in, I agree completely. That Pyramid Roofing Company talk and text line is 447-KSGF. I'm Nick Reed. I love watching these hearings that are probing the cover-up of Joe Biden's decline. And the Democrats, of course, want nothing of it. Chuck Schumer holding a press conference that, the Republicans are going over there instead of, while we're trying to feed kids, hungry kids, and we're trying to make sure sick people aren't kicked off Medicaid, and they're just worried about this. And I think even some Republicans can look at these hearings and be like, I mean, really? We already know. What's the point? Harold Ford Jr. is a Democrat observer that is on Fox News, The Five oftentimes, and he's like, hey, we lost. I mean, we've paid the price for this, so sort of suggesting that the toll has been paid on this thing, and so we should move forward. But here's the truth of the matter. Here's my truth. The people who are responsible for it are still, like, there was no accountability. Now, they can say, well, the election, that was accountability. But of Kamala Harris, yeah. But these people like Chuck Schumer knew. Kamala Harris, she's still in the public. And I'm not saying necessarily these people should go to prison or anything. I mean, I guess they didn't break any laws. If we have some illegal use of auto pen, and there may be some implications in that. And that, by the way, does need to be understood and explored. But it's like these are all the same people. It's like if you have a business and you have a bunch of employees and you find out that they did something really, really, really bad and wrong, and it gets a lot of public coverage, and let's say, I'm trying to think of the best analogy here. Let's say you're bidding on a project, and somebody else is bidding on the project. And then there's a massive scandal because it turns out that half, or that your crew, your people were involved in some sort of massive cover-up, could be potential illegalities there. You were lying to people. I mean, it was just very clear immoral behavior at best, and so you lose the bid. Well, then you come back around and you're making a bid on another project, and people are like, no, we remember you and all of your employees. You scammed us. And then the response being, well, yeah, but we lost that bid. Well, yeah, but still, that doesn't mean, oh, okay, let's just all go back to normal now. Sure, we'll let you, and we'll go ahead and hire you for this bid because, well, you lost the last one. I know it's kind of a clunky analogy, but it's just like, well, we lost the election, so that means restart and forget everything that we said, forget all the lies that we told you. You are automatically supposed to be trusting us again. We're supposed to go back, forget everything. Just think of it's a relationship issue. Say you're in a relationship and your girlfriend finds out that you've been totally lying to her about something. Totally lying. Everything she thought you were, you weren't. Leading a double life. And the night that she finds out about it, you're supposed to go out on a date. Or maybe go away on, maybe go away for the weekend. Going to go to downstream or somewhere and everything, and obviously things blow up, and you're not going to go to downstream for the weekend after that. But then Monday comes around, and then you just think everything should be fine, and you're like, well, we didn't go to downstream. I mean, I've already paid the price for this. I can't. No, I can't trust you. You lied. You lied to me for a very long time. You think that it's just supposed to go back to normal, but that's what the Democrats are expecting. They're trying to, I guess you can't blame them, use their loss against the American people, saying, well, you punished us already, so now you have to go back to believing what we say. We shouldn't be held accountable for anything. You should not be asking any more questions about this. You should not want to get to the bottom of who did what and whether anything illegal was done and whether or not, who was running the freaking country, for Pete's sake, because we lost the last election. So that wipes everything. No, that's not how it works. But I also believe this, genuinely, that the environment in D.C., particularly for Democrats, but not isolated to Democrats, is so detached from morality and honesty that the election cycle is their moral compass. And I think that they instinctually, genuinely believe that, well, because we lost the last election, then okay, so we paid the price. Now let's just move on. That there's no shame. There's no sense of, yeah, we should. Like, there's not been a single person, not a single Democrat, who has acknowledged, yeah, I knew to some degree, and then said, I'm going to step down because I've lost trust with the American people. I misled people. I violated not just my oath, but my commitment to the people that I represent to always be honest with them. And so for those reasons, I'm going to step down. Not a single Democrat has done that. They just expect you to move on because their party didn't win the presidency. Springfield's Talk 104.1. I'm Nick Reed.
Springfield's Talk 1041, the first alert forecast from Ozarks First meteorologist Tom Schmidt, sponsored by Wolfpack Cleaners, your residential and commercial cleaning professionals. Today we'll see sunny skies with a high near 86. Tonight clear with a low around 65. For your Friday, sunny with a high near 91. And for Saturday, sunny and hot with a high near 92.
Pyramid Roofing Company talk and text line. January 6th means nothing. We lost. Get over it. Same thing. This is an excellent point. I was talking in the previous segment. The Democrats are taking this position that it is a waste of time investigating or trying to get to the bottom of the implications and who is actually running the country regarding the cover-up of Joe Biden's decline. And their position is, hey, we lost, so we paid the price. Let's just move on. And after January 6th, and Republicans, you may recall those midterm elections. It was supposed to be this red wave, and it wasn't a red wave. And a lot of people felt that it was the efforts by Democrats to sensationalize January 6th was effective enough to prevent Republicans from having successes during those midterm elections. And so and that's a great point that someone texted in, let's take the Democrats' approach and say, hey, Republicans lost an election because of that, so there's nothing left to see here. Let's move on. Do Republicans is that the position now? We're no longer going to hear anything about January 6th? I think we know that that's not true. There's a New York Times report regarding the Democrat Party and how it continues even further than it already has, descend into chaos, and may be going full-blown broke. From the New York Times piece, Inside the Chaos Swirling Through a DNC Desperate for Cash, they write, just months into the tenure of a new party leader, Ken Martin, the Democratic National Committee's financial situation has grown so bleak that top officials have discussed whether they might need to borrow money just to keep paying the bills. Fundraising from major donors, some of whom Mr. Martin has still not even spoken with, has slowed sharply. At the same time, he's expanded the party's financial commitments to every state, even to far-flung territories like Guam. Fellow Democrats are grumbling that Martin, who quietly accepted a raise after taking the post, of course he did, Martin has been badly distracted by internal battles. So far, they say, he has been unable to help unite his party against Republicans who control the federal government. A protracted and public fight with David Hogg, the 25-year-old activist turns DNC vice chair, who blindsided party officials with a plan to challenge incumbent Democrats, of course made things worse. The clash included the leak of embarrassing audio of Mr. Martin questioning his own role and ended in Hogg's unceremonious exit this month. And that exit actually was an overturning of yet another election by the Democrats. And that, of course, it's a New York Times, so they're going to soften that up a bit. This really genuinely is the Democrat Party today. And part of the reason that there is no real leadership coming to the top and reigning control of it is because you have two parties, and they are, one of the parties is so extreme that when it comes to a lot of issues, 80% of Americans are on the opposing side. And they are oftentimes fully anti-American. They declare that we're the worst country in the world at times. I mean, these are just, they're crazy. And the other part of the party are those who have in the past recognized, okay, we failed here, let's pivot here, we need to figure out how to be more in line with Americans. And their approach was different. So, and their approach was where were we out of line, and how can we get back in line with what the Americans want? But the more radical wing of the Democrat Party, their approach is, no, we're right. The voters are wrong. We just need to do a better job of explaining why they're wrong to them so that they see the errors of their way. They're the wrong ones. They need to change. So when you have a political party with two factions, one that says, hey, we're out of step, we need to figure out how to get in step, and then the other faction says, we're not out of step, it's the voters who are out of step, we need to figure out how to make them comply with what we want, you have a very, very big problem. You have two captains, one that says we have to go east, while the other says we have to go west. And while one side, one captain may say, "Well, okay, we can kind of meet in the middle, just let's see how we can come together." The other captain is like, "Hell no, we are going this way, and if you don't like it, we'll throw you overboard." You can't coexist like that. You cannot compromise with those people. And the most dangerous thing, self-damaging thing that the Democrat Party has done is they have taken what once were these, in particular young and sometimes foreign people from other countries who have come here, gotten elected to Congress, that are on the left, and they're the extreme left, but they because they were active and they were oftentimes younger, they began giving them these little positions. They let them in. And the thing about crazy people is they don't have restraint. And frankly, it serves them well because they don't ever stop. They just keep going and going and going and going. And what has occurred before the Democrat Party knew it is they have gotten into enough positions of power that the party has no singular direction any longer. And if human nature tells us anything, it is that the crazies are going to end up controlling the party completely. They're just going to. One, those who are less crazy in the Democrat Party, they're aging out. They're like 80 plus years old. And there are some within the Democrat Party that are trying to replace them. But I don't believe it's going to work. And the media has tried to help them a little bit. There was a Washington Post piece about the new centrist in the Democrat Party, and it cites 3 Democrat women. And it was this whole story just, about them and being centrist and so forth. One, the article didn't talk about their positions on anything. And I can tell you why. Because in order to be a real, quote, centrist, you have to do things that the left wing of your party will absolutely not accept, and they will destroy you. This is the problem that the Democrat Party has created. You have to be an extremist, otherwise you will be destroyed within your own party. We saw it with Gavin Newsom's 7-second attempt as part of his presidential launch to sit down with the opposition. And he just alluded to the fact that he agreed that when a girl loses against a boy, that system isn't fair. And the left wing of his party immediately came out to destroy him. So what do you do in a situation like that? You have 2 fighters, one that wants to abide by the rules and the other that says there are no rules. I'll rip your throat out and tear your face off, and I don't care what anybody says about it. Who's going to win? That's what the Democrat Party is facing today. So there may be criticism of the DNC chair Martin because, there's all this controversy and division and David Hogg, and he can't bring everyone together. I don't know. You can't bring these people together. It is an impossible task, which, of course, leads us to wonder what is this party going to look like? Whomever the next nominee is going to be, it's going to be a very interesting thing to see. Will it be the extreme left, or will the Democrat Party do what they have done for the last several nominations and rigged it? They rigged it for Obama. They rigged it for Hillary. They rigged it for Biden. And then when that didn't turn out, they overthrew that one. By the way, this isn't anything I'm saying as a right-winger. Democrats understand this. I mean, you listen to Democrat podcasters, activists. It's one of the reasons Tulsi Gabbard had a falling out years before she joined up with Trump, because she was a delegate for Bernie Sanders during the process in which it was rigged for Hillary. So the establishment, less crazy people that have been in charge of this stuff for the last several presidential cycles have essentially picked the nominee. I can't imagine that the crazies have gotten enough power and control within the party. I can't imagine them allowing that to happen this time. So yeah, it's going to be a fascinating few years to watch. Glad it ain't my party. Springfield's Talk 1041. I'm Nick Reed. Pyramid Roofing Company talk and text line. Question about Joe Biden's presidency. If he was incompetent and other people were making decisions for him, what are the legalities of that? I don't know. And this is where a lot of people have argued of this genuinely, truly was what the 25th Amendment was created for all the talk about using it against Trump, which was just obscene. This literally was it. This was a guy that couldn't function. To the point that was proven by what we now know, and that he was not in charge. He wasn't in charge because he could not be. I mean, I guess if Jake Tapper offered anything, it was actual comments from people on the inside validating what so many of us knew had to be the case. And that is he was not running the show. And this whole auto pen thing, you know, I don't know how you even, let's say that it's proven that he didn't use the, it's uncharted territory. The biggest problem, I would argue, though, and the scenarios that would need to exist to prove that decisions were made that Joe Biden did not make, and then somebody utilized the auto pen in order to sign off on it through executive order or a pardon or whatever it may be, would require people within the Democrat Party and within that administration telling on one another And even though it has gotten to the point where many of them are openly now acknowledging, well, yes, we knew something was wrong with him, I don't know what incentive they would have to go a great leap forward and say, oh, yes, and by the way, this is the thing that we did. This is how we took advantage of it. Because let's remember, there's no Republican involved in these scenarios. They're all Democrats. So ultimately, they are all on the same team. Now, you could have, let's just say, for whatever reason, Joe Biden, and Joe Biden has, as of, I don't know, just even a few weeks ago, said, hey, every decision that was ever made was my decision. Every pardon that was ever made was my decision. Every one of them. Let's say for whatever reason he decided, he gets mad and he's like, you know what, I'm going to start telling the truth. And I didn't approve this. I didn't sign on of this. Well, the Republicans have rightfully so, but not deliberately, given those who would be implicated in running things, quote, illegally, the ultimate defense, and that is, well, you can't believe this guy is senile. Remember? That's why we're all here. So you can't, all of a sudden, like, well, Joe Biden said he didn't sign it. Well, he has said a lot of things, right? We all know the guy's senile. And, I mean, if he was senile 3 years ago, as you have so artfully pointed out, he clearly is senile now. And that defense, ironically, has been built in by the very exposure of the big lie here and the big cover-up. And outside of any exposure from actual communication, text messaging or emails, in which you had people talking about, hey, I'm going to go ahead and sign this pardon, and just really exposing something through their own messaging back and forth. I just don't know that there is any way to know for sure what we all know for sure, to know the specific examples and incidents. And unfortunately, that's just the nature of it. Of course, there could always be something that does pop up that is quote unquote proof that's undeniable. I do, that being said, think it's important for this information to come out and for these hearings to take place. If anything, because Americans need to remember that one of these two political parties that to this day says you should trust us was part of that massive, corrupt scam and cover-up. Springfield's Talk 1041. I'm Nick Reed. There have been some new revelations, just a little more detail, not a whole heck of a lot, but it's just so intriguing, this part of that initial defense launch by the Israelis against Iran and taking out some of that top leadership. And the latest report that Israel Secret Services used a fake phone call to trick the top commanders of Iran's Air Force into gathering at a single location before taking them out in a targeted strike, an Israeli Channel 12 commentator revealed in a statement confirmed to the JC, I think it's the Jerusalem Chronicle, I believe, by Israeli sources. Amit Segal told the Call Me Back podcast on Monday, quote, what Israel did was create a fake phone call for 20 minutes of the Air Force senior staff calling them to a specific bunker in Tehran. Now, a couple of aspects of this that I just think are interesting. One, it was sort of twofold in the sense that the way that they took advantage of the sort of authoritarian nature of Iran, and that you never question anything whatsoever. Like, you're given an order, you just do it. You do not. It doesn't matter how crazy it seems. You just do it. And they knew that. They also knew that because of the totalitarian nature of how things are run, that the infrastructure in terms of the human assets who does this and that, like, they may have only one person that has the ability to carry out some big launch, right? There's no sort of chain of command that is immediately existing where this person and this person and this person in the way that we may be accustomed to. And so the Israelis took advantage of this by utilizing these channels to create this fake call for a meeting, knowing that even if it seemed odd or they were like, why are we doing this? They would never question the authority of calling it because you just don't do that. But at the same time, these were all people that were the only people who had the authority to launch immediately the 1,000 missiles. And although missiles would subsequently come, what they wanted to prevent from happening was all of those. So when they had them all in that one room, and then they began launching the attack, there was no one available to launch the missiles because those were the people handpicked by the Israelis to trick them to be in the room, and then for good measure, they blew it up. So it was like a multi-layer cake of just incredible success. Just very, very fascinating, which, in the context of war, on one hand, it seems, I don't know, a bit inappropriate to look at it that way, but I don't think that that it is that you can deny some of this stuff that has been pulled off has just been, in retrospect, absolutely brilliant by the Israelis. And as more comes out once things end, however that is, I think we'll probably be even more fascinated. We got another hour coming up. If you miss any of it, of course, of the show, we've got the podcast up at ksgf.com. Springfield's Talk 1041. Hello, everyone. My name is Nick Reed, Ozarks Elder Law. No planning at all is a bad idea. Like, I'll do it later. I'm young. What do I have to worry about? I'm only in my 40s. You know, it'd be nice. I don't know if it'd be nice or not. If you knew when you were going to die, would you want to know? I don't think that I would want to. I don't know. I'm glad we don't have that option. I tear myself up inside trying to figure out what I wanted to do. But point being is right now, we really don't have that option. And that means that we could leave family in a lurch. You have things, you have your home, you have assets, you have farmland, and you want it to go to your kids or your grandkids. You want it to be passed along. You want maybe even a legacy. It's important to you. If you don't have all that stuff locked in place, then you're going to find yourself in a world of hurt because government's going to decide. And you're like, but I have, next of kin, right? Nope, doesn't work that way. I downloaded something I did an online will. Doesn't work that way. Not Missouri. I mean, you're talking about any of this power of attorney stuff, particularly, or when it comes to medical decisions, even while you're still alive. Listen, just Ozarks Elder Law. Reach out to them. Even if you had set something up, but maybe it's been 10 years and maybe some laws have changed you're not aware of. Or your circumstances have changed in ways that could affect the will or power of attorney. Ozarks Elder Law, 10 area locations, fantastic people. They do a great job. There's, I think I said 10 area locations. So, yeah, if you're in the listening area, you're going to be able to find them. And consultation's free. And they'll let you know ahead of time, all right, so here's what you need to do in order to be safe and secure. Here's what it'll cost you. It's not hourly. It's one price. So it's all straightforward, transparent, and easy. That's who they are, ozarkselderlaw.com. Also, Nick's endorsements, KSGF.com. All right, so we have Author of the Week coming up. And actually, it's kind of an interesting Author of the Week. I learned about her because of James Clary. James Clary is going to have her on his show coming up Saturday at 8 a.m., and then at 9, his show will be in podcast version if you aren't able to catch it. He is going to spend his entire hour, he plans on spending his entire show talking with her. So, obviously, this will be an abbreviated version, and it is definitely an interesting one, to say the very least. So, we'll chat with her coming up, sponsored by ABC Books on North Glenstone. Right now, the latest news update.
And the first alert forecast from Ozarks First meteorologist Tom Schmidt, sponsored by St. Clair the Ozarks Home Improvements. Today we'll see sunny skies with a high near 86. Tonight clear with a low around 65. For your Friday, sunny with a high near 91. And looking at a Saturday, sunny and hot with a high near 92.
I'm Nick Reed. It's Thursday, which means it's Author of the Week, sponsored by the incredible people at ABC Books on North Glenstone, sponsoring our Author of the Week segment every Thursday. And if you miss any of the segment or it in its entirety, of course, we've got it up in podcast form at ksgf.com. And then at ABC Books, they actually have a physical Author of the Week section up where you'll find a lot of the books from our authors of the week. And this week, Katie Asher, the book is The Book of Heaven, a story of hope for the outcast, the broken, and those who lost faith. And this is a little bit different going into this. This actually, this interview was set up because of James Clary. Those of you who know James, he fills in for me. And then on Saturday mornings, he has his show, Clarification, at 8 a.m., and he is going to be interviewing Katie Asher. And I think that it all came about because of something called the telepathy tapes, which is separate from her book. And so this is a little unstructured for those of you who are listening. I just kind of want to give you an understanding of why that is, and the fact that she is going to be joining James for the entirety of his show on Saturday. So anything that you hear, of course, the book itself will be great information for you, but also listening to James' show. And if you miss it, that also will be up in podcast form just after his show ends at ksgf.com. So that being said, that very clunky introduction, Katie, thank you so much for being with us. And I don't know, is it best to start talking about, because I know you're going to be talking about the telepathy tapes with James, kind of start with that and then go back to the book. What's the best way to go into this?
Well, first of all, thank you so much for having me, and I'm really excited to be here and just to share about a little bit about our story. And basically, when I wrote our book, I was reaching out to a different scientist to try to find someone who could validate what I had discovered about my son's unique and incredible spiritual gifts. And in the process, we were connected with this film director, Kai Dickens, who is basically the director, producer, and creator of the telepathy tapes. And so that's my connection to them. And I'm an integral part of the telepathy tapes, which is now in the process of becoming a documentary, which we're super excited about. But our story, The Book of Heaven, happened. It was published in 2021, I think. I have to go back and look.
Sometime.
And so it is basically us recounting our journey from beginning with my childhood through my son's very severe diagnosis and regression with autism, and through his entire upbringing where there was no hope and I lost hope, and ultimately to where he got his voice and then the miracles began.
Now, and I don't know how instrumental this is to the premise of the book itself, but I know we have spent a great deal of time, as James have, talking just about the issue of autism and then, vaccines and so forth. And I know that is, I believe, at least an important part of the story for you all.
It is an important part of the story. And I actually do not go into significant scientific detail about the complexity of how the vaccine is responsible. I just touch on it a little bit. And the reason why I didn't go into it great depths in the book is because people are so polarized by that topic. And because this was really a story about faith and love and hope, I didn't want to polarize people
Right.
in the middle of our book. So I addressed it and then I moved on. But I'm happy to explain that to anybody who wants to know how do vaccines have anything to do with severe autism. I can totally explain that.
Well, if you don't mind, as being, of course, we've got somewhat of a limited time, but whatever information that you feel is necessary, particularly when it comes to the overall story here, if you would go ahead and explain that.
I sure would. Okay, so basically, these vaccines have an adjuvant in them, and they have multiple adjuvants, but in particular, I want to discuss aluminum. Whenever I was my son's regression had happened, and we started doing all these tests to try to figure out what was wrong. One of the tests we did was a metal test. And I, at the time, had been hearing about mercury. So I expected to see elevated levels of mercury in this test. And there was elevated levels of mercury. But the one that shocked me was the one that reached the entire top of the chart. And that was aluminum. And I was shocked by that. I was like, what? Where did aluminum come from? Why is there aluminum? What's aluminum doing in here? Aluminum is a non-human element,
Right.
just so everybody knows. That's not supposed to be in the human body. It's great for industrial use. And the reason why it's great for industrial use is because of its atomic number, which is 13. For anybody who just like real basic chemistry, the way the way all elements work is they have 2 electrons in their first shell, and then they can, on every shell after that, they can have up to 4 pairs. So with aluminum having an atomic number of 13, that means the outer shell, the valence shell, has the balance, and that determines how electronegative is. So that means aluminum has 3 electrons in its valence shell. That makes it highly electronegative. So this basically creates oxidative stress because it's trying to fill those valence shells, okay? And as it begins to pull electrons from other cells, then those cells are now unstable, and then they pull cells, and so basically this almost like fusion, like massive oxidative stress all over the entire body happens. That triggers the immune system. This was why they use it. But the problem is they can't control that reaction. And so in some people, like my son, it triggers interleukin 6, a mass amount of interleukin 6, and that causes a cytokine storm. Cytokine storm causes massive cellular and organ damage, sometimes failure, and it also causes encephalopathy. Encephalopathy interrupts neural development. And that is very important because what happens is we're all born with this ability to perceive our physical and metaphysical environment. And we have massive amounts of sensory synapses that are absorbing everything and teaching us where we are in space, as well as how to connect with other human beings through emotion, through everything. And whenever we normally go through development, the beginning of motor development is preceded by the pruning of sensory synapses. And that's very important because none of us are born with motor. And motor has to develop. And the way it develops is sensory synapses are pruned, and then there's sensory and motor integration as the motor begins to develop. When you have encephalopathy, that interrupts that pruning process, and then it interrupts the motor development, and then, of course, it interrupts the sensory and motor integration. So they basically don't develop motor into their physical body, and they're still taking in all of that sensory. And that's why they have all these incredible gifts, and that's also why they can't control their bodies. And there.
So we're talking with our author of the week, Katie Asher. The book is The Book of Heaven, a story of hope for the outcast, the broken, and those who lost faith. And so you are, and I understand this, again, talking with James Clary, who is going to have Katie on his show Saturday, that this is what would be considered a severe case. It seems as if the spectrum has gotten very, very broad to where once upon a time, if someone was autistic, you could almost tell by observation, but it's gotten to where now people self-identify and you're like, oh, I had no idea. But this was what one would consider a severe case, correct?
This is severe autism. And when Houston was diagnosed back in 2000, there were 3 diagnoses. There wasn't this enormous spectrum. There was Asperger's, there was pervasive developmental disorder, not otherwise specified, called PDD-NOS, and there was autism. And autism had mild, moderate, severe. And Houston's is severe.
Now, at some point, something happened. I guess is a very simple way to put it. I know it's described as sort of like these prison doors opening up, and then this ability to communicate occurred. So tell us about this.
Well, so I would say the first miracle happened when Houston was 17 years old, and at the time I had been. I was doing this yoga training, right? And to become a yoga instructor. And I remember they had us all going around the room to give our intention. And in my head, I was like, nobody wants to hear anything you're going through. So just be as brief as possible and don't share anything about yourself. That's what I was telling myself internally. And so when I was the last person and they asked me to give my intention. And so I said something very vague. And then almost without thought, I blurted out, oh, and I would like bad things to stop happening. And they were like shocked that I said that. And they said, well, why would you say that? And I was triggered. And I said, I know how belief works. I said, you believe what you've experienced. That's what I've experienced. Why would I believe anything else? And they really challenged me that good had just as much chance of happening as bad. And I had been very well indoctrinated into suffering and enduring. So it was actually a challenging thought to expect something good to happen. I had been trained to expect and to prepare and to endure bad. And so I went home with this knowledge. And one of the things they said to me was, look around you, pick up something, whether it's the chair or the table or a book, anything. And then ask yourself, what was that thing before it was the thing in your hand? And the reality is everything material was first a thought before it was a thing. Everything. And that really had an impact on me. And so I was wrestling with this idea that my thoughts could become things. And I did not want my current thoughts at that time to become anything because they were just despair, really. I was truly in a desperate and despairing place in my heart. And so that right after that, it was the Wednesday night before Thanksgiving. I was working 3 jobs. I'm a single mom, 5 kids, just like broke as broke can be and worn to the bone. And I laid down on the couch and my body was I was so stressed and anxious and overwhelmed and fatigued that my body was vibrating and I couldn't go to sleep. And suddenly my severely autistic son comes downstairs and sits down on the couch at my feet, which is something he never did. He usually is jumping up and down, rocking back and forth, flapping his hand, making booming noises, fast forwarding and rewinding videos. He doesn't sit still. That just isn't what he does. And suddenly he reached over and tugged at the blanket very intentionally, exactly like you would do to get someone's attention. And he spoke. And he said, Mama. And that was the first time, my son was 17, it was the first time he'd ever called my name. I opened my eyes and he was looking directly in my eyes, which is also something he couldn't do. And he said, I love you. And I was so overwhelmed that in that moment, I felt like I had been given a choice, that I could believe in a miracle or I could continue to go down this path of despair. And I chose to believe in a miracle. And I didn't know what that miracle was going to be. I just knew that I had this idea that my thoughts could bring to pass the thing that I needed and wanted most in my life. And so I held on to that. And it was another 5 years before we found out about spelling. And when we found out about spelling, the first time I'd ever heard about it, I thought, oh, that only works because their son's not as severe as mine. And then we met another family that we had known for years when Houston was very small. And their son had grown up and was now spelling. And I knew that this son was as severe as my son. And yet here he was, and he was communicating to me. And he said, do not let money or time deter you. Do not let the fact that you've tried a zillion interventions over the years make you gun shy. This is the real deal. It works. We need a voice just like everyone else does. We need the same chance to be known that everyone else gets effortlessly.
Now,
It was enough of an encouragement to me, and I witnessed it. I saw all this out.
Well, and if you could, we're talking with Katie Asher, our author of the week, the Book of Heaven, a story of hope for the outcast, the broken, and those who lost faith. You talk about the spelling. Will you explain to people what that is?
So what we learned was that what autism is, remember when I was telling about how their motor doesn't develop? So it's basically whole body apraxia, which means that the signals that are trying to go to the body don't go to the body. And they have such a difficult time motor planning. And what spelling does is it takes communication out of the fine motor, 100 different muscles that are required to speak, and it puts it in gross motor in the motion of the arm, where they have slightly more control. And so what they're doing is they're spelling and they're pointing to one letter at a time to spell out everything that they want to say. And that's what it is. It's a gross motor activity to communicate.
Now, and I know we started off talking about, and James is going to focus again on his show Clarification this Saturday at 8 a.m. on, I think, a lot of the telepathy tapes component of this. And so in the last few minutes that we have, if you could sort of, I guess, summarize, okay, here's what is in the book, but I don't know if you'd say maybe the rest of the story is something that would be in the telepathy tapes. Is that a good layout of it? And if so, where does everything fit?
Sure, I'll explain pretty quickly. So once Houston, I started this spelling, and then very quickly he spelled his first words to me, which were, "I'm in here." And of course, that rocked my world. And then I was just obsessed with just getting to know my son. And I couldn't believe how much he knew. It seemed like he knew everything. He knew things I didn't know. He started spelling out the Declaration of Independence and the Gettysburg Address. Clearly, I don't know all of that. So I was astonished by where did all this knowledge come from? And so I asked him one night, how do you know all this? Do you just have really good hearing? And he must have laughed. But he spelled, "I'm special. I can hear thoughts." And of course, I didn't believe that because that seemed just crazy. And then I tested him, and of course, he proved it. And that was just the beginning of it, because the ability to hear thoughts, and this goes back to what I was sharing with you earlier, that thought is a thing, that everything material comes from thought, that it comes from spirit. And this is the reality, is that thought and energy are the same. And because they are so disconnected from their physical body, they are experiencing the whole spiritual metaphysical realm in varying degrees. But with Houston, because of the severity of his disconnection to his body, he's experiencing an extraordinary amount of the spiritual and metaphysical realm. And so the rest of the book is that unveiling, and then me trying to understand what all this meant. How was this possible? And so I dove very deeply into the science as well as the spirituality. And Houston would sit there and spell out things and describe verses in heaven or in the Bible that describe heaven that he had never read. And he would describe truths in the Bible that he had never read. And the only way that you could possibly have this kind of understanding, this deep comprehension of biblical, theological, and spiritual truths is to have experienced it. Because he did not experience it in the basement in the church where they kept him when we would go to church. That was not where he learned all of this.
And so, what's your hope in this? People who pick up the book, they read the book. I suspect that it is for people well beyond parents of autistic kids. What do you? Who's the audience? What do you want people to get out of this?
There's two audiences. The first audience is, obviously, I desperately want parents of non-speakers to read this book, and anyone who is connected with these families, because they need all of their family members to understand what's actually going on, what they're actually experiencing them, and support them in a way that is compassionate instead of deeply hurtful and despairing, because that's what these parents do. These parents need hope like you don't even understand. They are struggling to stay alive. And I'm not in any way exaggerating that statement. That is not hyperbole.
Yeah.
That's true. And then we need society to completely change. We need everything about society to change. We need people to recognize the equal humanity in all of us. We need people to recognize that faith is a real thing, that these unseen ideas, we think they're just concept. We think faith and doubt it's just a concept, but it's an actual unseen force that affects our material world. We need everyone to read and everyone to believe. We need the whole world to have faith and kindness and love and goodness. We need the world to be seeking what is good instead of what is selfish and destructive. So
Well, so then I wanted to,
everybody, that's who needs to read it.
and then the again, telepathy tapes, which I know I keep repeating this but for people who are tuning in, that James is going to be talking about on Saturday during his show, or a lot about that, because I know our listeners, and so they're going to want to check out the book, but they're also going to be looking up this telepathy tapes. Is that I'm not familiar with it like James is. He tried to fill me in a little bit on it, but so is that a series? Or are you in all of it? Are you in an episode? If people look that up and they want to hear more about your information, what are they seeking there?
So right now there's one season. It's 10 episodes. I'm introduced in episode 3, and I'm pretty much an integral part of the rest of the series. I'm not necessarily in every episode, but Houston and I both play a role throughout the episode, throughout the season. Right now they're doing talk tracks, which are just kind of these bonus episodes, and I don't really have a lot of participation in those. It's not a spiritual podcast, but there are several people, us included, who very much have a spiritual mindset and perspective about these gifts. And I just want to make sure that everyone's clear that this is not a spiritual podcast. It is more of someone from the outside who's learning about these individuals who have spiritual gifts. That's the perspective.
Well, I really appreciate you coming on, sharing the story, especially given sort of the last minute scenario. And for those that missed the beginning of this, James Clary, his show Clarification, which is on Saturday at 8 a.m., he's going to be talking with Katie about a lot of this. And one of the things that I'll tell those of you that are listening right now, just in talking with James, and you hear the very brief description of some of this from Katie, and you think when she talks about the telepathy and reading or hearing thoughts, and I think a lot of people think, oh well, I mean, maybe you kind of make oneself think that because he knew what I was thinking. But James explaining to me some of the scientific aspects behind it is really extremely fascinating. So I would encourage people to recognize that there's just a lot more depth to it. The book again. From Katie Asher is The Book of Heaven, a story of hope for the outcast, the broken, and those who lost faith. And James will have his entire hour on Saturday at 8 will be with Katie. And then if you miss any of that, the podcast will be up at 9 o'clock at ksgf.com. And I think that gets shot over to iTunes and Spotify like my show does as well. Katie, thank you so much for sharing. Author of the Week, Katie Asher, sponsored by ABC Books on North Glenstone. I'm Nick Reed. We will be broadcasting live tomorrow morning. Friday, kicking off the weekend from Scramblers. The Friday Road Show sponsored by Shirley's Heating and Air. Doors do open at 6 a.m. Apologies to traffic, running a little bit behind, I know, so we'll head straight over there now on Springfield's Talk 1041.
Springfield's Talk 1041, the first alert forecast from Ozarks First meteorologist Tom Schmidt, sponsored by Wolfpack Cleaners, your residential and commercial cleaning professionals. Today we'll see sunny skies with a high near 86. Tonight clear with a low around 65. For your Friday, sunny with a high near 91. And for Saturday, sunny and hot with a high near 92. And Foreman Mechanical Heating and Air, the first official day of summer is tomorrow. So now is the time to go ahead and get ahead of all of your AC needs. Now, whether you need a tune-up, a service repair, or maybe this is the year that you finally do that upgrade, the Foreman team can help you out with all of your HVAC needs. And it doesn't matter if you need residential services or commercial services, they do both. They also offer a 24/7 emergency line because they do understand things pop up after those normal business hours. So if it is time to have the Foreman team out to your home to help beat that summer heat, make sure to reach out to Russell today. Now you can find all of the contact information for Foreman Mechanical Heating and Air under the Sarah's Endorsements tab at ksgf.com.
All right, I want to play audio, a story that somebody actually texted in on the Pyramid Roofing Company Talk and Text line that aired. This was KY3, correct?
Correct.
And this is, I guess you would have it in the folder of bringing awareness to the issue of poverty, and here is the story.
Good morning. Nearly 20% of people in Springfield are living in poverty. That's according to the U.S. Census Bureau. Billy Brightman right now live at the National Avenue Christian Church to tell us about an event this afternoon that will show us their struggles. Billy, good morning.
Good morning. The Ozarks Area Community Action Corporation is hosting a community poverty simulation today where people will live out a life, a pretend life, in the shoes of someone experiencing poverty. And while this life might be pretend, it's based off of real experiences and real stories from real people in the community. Those participating will live out 4 15-minute long weeks where they'll have to go to work, take care of their families, pay the bills, and try to come out on top. OCAC has run these simulations in the past, but this is the first one that's open to the public.
You know, a lot of us are a lot closer to poverty than maybe we would think. So that's why it's so important to just, be there for your neighbors, be kind to folks, and just get that better understanding of what folks maybe are going through so we can just have a happier, healthier community.
The simulation is here at the National Avenue Christian Church from 1:30 to 3:30 today. Live in Springfield, Billy Brightman, KY3 News.
So what do you think of that story?
Well, I think that a lot of people go to work and try to take care of their families and feed their families. And it's kind of, I don't know.
It's such now, I guess in fairness, I could go and do this cosplay, or not even cosplay, but virtual. I wonder if it's an Oculus. Do they give you an Oculus to?
That's a good question.
I didn't watch the visual. I just heard the audio.
Do you remember when the library?
Yeah, I remember the library doing something similar to this. And now it says also you can in 15 minutes you live the life of somebody that's in poverty. So I'm guessing what they do is like, oh, here's how much money you have, and okay, so here's a segment of the 15 minutes where you go to the grocery store. Here's a set, and it's supposed to show you that you can't live on this amount of money or whatever. Now, of course, there's so many different available resources out there, and I'll fully admit that not going through, and I honestly don't have any intention to, the simulator. I can't say, oh, well, here's what it brings to the table. But it just increasingly seems to me as if we continue to find ways to allow people to feel as if they're doing something without really doing anything.
Yeah. Well, and to that point, it's like they said in the story, it's 15 minutes. Well, how did they land on 15 minutes?
Yeah.
And then you just go back to normal. But you do it for, what
right.
did they say,
it's
like 4
well,
weeks?
Yeah, just so you know. I mean, so you do it and you're like, oh, okay, now I know. I'm going to go back to my normal. Well, and so also what is the goal? I guess the goal is so people know what it's like. Well, okay, but then what? Is that just it? Like, okay, now we know. Do you want more out of people? Or are you asking people to support programs? Are you asking people to support government doing more? What's the end game here? But I don't know. It just increasingly it seems as if we give people these opportunities to where it's like we look like we're doing something, but we're really not. I guess in the end, I look at something like this and go, how is this going to help anyone?
How is this going to benefit?
Yeah, what is the end result? And I think oftentimes what happens, well, it's an awareness campaign. So people are aware. Okay, why do you want people aware?
And were you not before?
Yeah, and and like, well, but now they'll know what it's actually like. Well, not really. I mean, that's like watching a preview at a movie and saying, well, now you know what the movie, I mean, it's just different. I don't know. I guess it doesn't hurt anything. I don't know if tax dollars go to this or whatever. So on one hand, it's like, all right, well, do whatever you want. Have virtual poverty. People can live out a week in 15 minutes, and I'm sure that the people behind it are well intended. But it is. I guess it isn't to me so much about the people who are offering this up as much as people that will go do it. Because I just feel like if somebody really, truly, genuinely is wanting to help people who need financial help in a meaningful way, that's not going to be the route they go. I guess that's what it all boils down to. It's almost like an easy out for people who want to pretend as if they're doing something when they're actually not. I don't know. I'll say this. I don't think it's as bad as when there used to be these quote events, and I believe one weekend it was on the MSU campus where it was supposed to expose young people to what it's like to be homeless. And it was just a weekend camping event. Like they let people camp on campus and there was food. It was like basically they just hung out, had a good time camping, but they all got to pat themselves on the back because, well, now we know what it's like to be homeless. Nope, that's called camping. That's a much different thing. You want to know what it's like to be homeless? You know, I tell you what, grab a tent and then go find a homeless camp and live there for a while. That'll give you a much better idea. Springfield's Talk 1041. I'm Nick Reed. Emily Johnson, House Theory Realty. One of the massive benefits, let's say you are looking to sell your home, and if you've not sold your home, oftentimes what happens, people, they come check it out and everything, and then your realtor gets back with you, and they're like, hey, they put in an offer, but they want some foundation repair done. There is some termite damage that they want taken care of. There's, some ducting. There's a list of things, and you're like, okay, I guess I could just pick one randomly. I don't know who's good, who's going to take forever. Are people going to take advantage of me because they know, well, I need to do this in order to sell my house, and so they're going to get in there and they're going to charge me 3 times. Emily Johnson has these connections. She knows who's good. She knows who's honest. And one of the things that you'll learn if you read the reviews of people who have utilized her services is some people will note she even arranged for that to be taken care of. She did all of that. That's not the level of service that you get most of the time. I can just tell you that, and many of you know that already from firsthand experience. So if you want premier top-of-the-line experience from somebody that's honest, and she's a friend of mine, and she wouldn't be if she weren't a good person, because I just don't hang out with trash. Emily Johnson, House Theory Realty. You think she liked that tagline?
Mm-hmm.
She
I
heard
like
that?
it.
You should use Emily because I don't hang out with trash.
There you go.
Yeah. All right. There you have it.
She's like, please stop.
Yeah. She's like, I'd rather.
Can you guys
yeah.
not do that?
Oh, it was nice and all, but maybe just in the future
Just
not doing.
stop.
I'll be like, it was Juneteenth.
Is that your excuse for everything
Yeah,
today?
that is, yeah. And people are like, I don't understand the connection. There isn't one. I just thought it's a holiday. I'm working on a holiday.
Mm-hmm. That's right.
Boom. There has been what is just a massive revelation that, of course, is not getting the coverage that it should deserve. And it is that not only did the Communist Chinese Party have a very elaborate plan that they executed in order to help Joe Biden get elected, but that the FBI knew about it and not just covered it up, but ordered all copies and original reports of the investigation and the evidence be destroyed. They covered it up for the Communist Chinese rigging the election. Now, of course, we're supposed to believe that the real danger to our democracy and collusion was Russia because, like, 4 Russians bought some ads on Facebook. But the communist Chinese taking on this massive plot to rig our election so that Joe Biden would get elected president, and the FBI destroying all the evidence to cover for the communist Chinese, to cover for the Biden campaign, cover for, I guess anyone and everyone involved, that isn't even worthy of news headlines. Now, the way that they did this was to create, let's see, there is a number here, and this was the 2020 election. At one point, and evidently this was either part of the evidence or how they learned about it, the U.S. Custom Border and Protection captured 19,888 fake driver's license from primarily Hong Kong and China in late July of 2020, and these fake driver's license were on their way to battleground states in the Midwest. And the apparent plot here was to use the fake driver's license that were not like fake people, they were real people, and I'll explain that part here in a moment, to get like absentee ballot and early voting ballots so that they could then be filled out and stuff the ballot box. Now, how much of this, and now, I guess almost 20,000 of them were captured. Apparently the numbers were greater than that because the plan here was to alter the outcome of the election. And given the disproportionately high number of people who, quote, voted in that election, brings up a lot of questions. Do you know where it is or where it was? Have you seen the story? Do you know where the Chinese got the information to create all of these fake IDs to try and alter the outcome of the election?
Where?
TikTok.
Oh.
The report found that China had harvested personal data from millions of TikTok users, including their names, ID numbers, and addresses, in order to make these fake IDs. Now, this is interesting because we have long, we've known about the TikTok issue and whether it should or shouldn't be banned, but it's been a very fair question. Well, exactly how could they use TikTok to do something nefarious? Well, rigging a presidential election seems pretty nefarious, and that is how they did it. Now, Congress, Chuck Grassley is leading this effort, trying to really get more information. One, did it work? How effective was it? But, again, also the fact that the FBI and then acting FBI Director Wray, he denied during questioning that there was any sort of effort they found in a meaningful way to influence the election when at the same time the FBI had the evidence and was destroying it. So this is an area where definitely I think people should go to prison in all likelihood if they are covering up, destroying evidence to protect the Communist Chinese and the Democrat Party from rigging elections. All that aside, for whatever your beliefs are and how deep it goes, fact of the matter is the fact that, 3 or 4 Russians bought ads on Facebook kind of pales in comparison to this, I would say. See you tomorrow morning at Scramblers Friday Road Show, sponsored by Shirley's Heating and Air. I'm Nick Reed.